Well, to our first conversation now, according to a new report on the Jollof Index by SBM Intelligence, the average cost of preparing a pot of jollof rice for a Nigerian family of 5 has more than tripled within 7 years. Breakdown of the cost of preparing a pot of the popular Nigerian delicacy rose by 220.7% to 13,160 naira in September 2023 from 4,087 naira in July 2016. Well, joining us now is a Kemesit Effiong, partner at SBM Intelligence. Join us via Zoom. Great to have you on the show. Good morning.
Morning, Laddie. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, so we're back at this Jollof Index again. Last time we spoke about this index, it was a new high. Now it's rising even more. Is there a risk that jollof rice might be getting off the menu soon at this point? Walk us through the data here.
That risk is real and palpable, right? So since we started collecting the index in 2015, right, January of 2015, this is a new high. As a matter of fact, it's been touching record highs for the better part of 2022 and 2023. And I think this just really tells in stark detail the inflation story, right? You know, all of the constituent ingredients of Jollof Index, right, at multi-year highs. Nigerian families continue to, cost cuts or manage that top line pressure, right, by either reducing the quantity of rice or generally food, right, that they consume, or lots of families are deploying substitutes, as it were. So fish instead of chicken and turkey, for example, right? So that's where we are really, right, with the Jollof Index. We track this across 13 markets in 9 cities. We saw price increases, right, in practically every market that we polled, right? And this is not even only a Nigerian story, right? Because we track food prices in Ghana as well, and those numbers are also increasing. Ghana itself also dealing with an elevated inflation,
Right.
Problem right now. So that's really where we are, right, with Jollof. I know that we're looking at the Christmas holiday period, right, as it were. So sadly, Laddie, I don't necessarily have interesting or particularly comforting news, right, as it were, but that really is the state of affairs on the ground.
Yes, definitely, because festivities also brings its own kind of inflation at this time. But what percentage of the monthly minimum wage would a family of 5 earning about 30,000 have to spend to make a pot of this delicacy?
I mean, it's quite high. So what's quite interesting is that I think about 10 days ago or thereabouts, we released an income survey where we basically asked Nigerians generally how they are doing from a financial standpoint and what they are spending on, right? And the average Nigerian household basically spends 97% of its monthly income on food, which basically means that that shortfall in terms of dealing with all of the other basic necessities of life, right? Think transportation, think accommodation, think education, and the likes. That slack is really being picked up by things like credit facilities, right? So a lot of fintech operators, as it were, as well as other financial institutions that offer credit facilities, are in a bit of a bull market right now because lots of Nigerians are taking out credit facilities. All of the other traditional mechanisms, obviously leaning on family and friends, right, for support, all of that definitely comes into play. So when you square that study that we did really with this, I think it really tells a average Nigerian consumer is with respect to how much inflation continues to extract a significant amount of their income, right, and where that leaves it vis-a-vis applying wealth and applying resources to all of the other things that may guarantee sort of a more stable income profile.
All right, let's look at policies so far, in the report. Which of them do you think worsen the food affordability right now?
So, I mean, the big one is infrastructure, right? We continue to pay, right, at a very significant level for the yawning infrastructure deficits that we have in the country. Now, take note of the fact that with the forex situation and the availability, right, of foreign exchange, right, well, non-availability really is what the market has been characterized by for the last couple of months. It's really difficult for lots of players, right, in the economy to import, right, some of these necessities, which on a short-term basis could, could provide some relief, right, from those elevated inflation and figures, as it were. But when you also consider the fact, and this is where infrastructure comes into play, that, for example, there's no port, right, currently in Nigeria that has excellent access infrastructure, right? So the roads to practically all the ports in the country are either impacted due to, poor maintenance, or they are overcrowded, or they're just seeing, a lot of demand, right? And all of this adds to the eventual price, right, of goods. Whether the climate crisis hasn't been so much of a factor this year as it was, right, last year, but you're also seeing a situation where, things like, the security situation in important food growing regions continues to remain, an important, definer, right, in this market. So it's really a suite of policy in action that continues to ensure that Nigerians are paying really elevated amounts, right, to keep food on the table for themselves and their loved ones, right. But I think the really big one that continues to color and characterize this market is that infrastructure story.
All right, let's look at the substitute here to jollof. I'd say fried rice or rice and stew. Are those prices also rising?
Yeah, so I mean, we track, food prices for all of the inputs that go into making all of the different types of rice. I don't think there's any sort of rice hedge, right, as it were, right? And, I would argue that fried rice is probably a bit more expensive to prepare than jollof rice. So that's probably the wrong side of the market to look at. Rice and stew is probably a better substitute just because, again, you can play with the kind of, sauce component that you have, that you would put, right, in that stew component. So that maybe is the hedge, right, in the market at the moment. But I would argue that it's probably not hedging you by much. Probably the real hedge is in looking at other non-rice culinary components. I know that there's been significant health, for example, right, in sort of the wheat and the starch and sort of the cassava derivative market, as it were, because lots of people, right, are just preparing more soup, right, where again there's a lot of room for maneuverability, right, and ingenuity if you're trying to save a naira or two, right. So that's probably where to look at right now. But if you're a rice lover, you're a rice heavy person, then you're probably having your plate of rice with some tears.
We do love our rice right here, and I know like the Yoruba stew can be quite basic, sometimes, and I feel like that should be affordable. It's just really big because I cook myself, so I know how to make some of these delicacies at this point. I know that the Yoruba stew is quite cheap, if you're not adding too much protein, in there. But which market, according to the report, is the most expensive place to make jollof rice, and which is the cheapest right now from your report?
So generally the North Central, the North Central and the Southeast markets tend to be at polar ends, right, of the divide, right? The North Central generally being more expensive. I mean, the Abuja markets, right, are usually quite interesting because even though nominally that part of the country is surrounded by some of the main food growing regions of the country, right, all of those regions are security impacted, right? And so if you're shopping out of Wuse or if you're shopping out of Yanya markets, which are the two markets in the FCT that we poll, then you've probably seen, and I mean, you've definitely seen, right, an increase in your shopping bill. The Southeast generally tends to do well. From a food security standpoint, it's mostly self-sufficient. And so it generally, it generally is the best performer from a regional perspective, right? In our index, and some of those price saving mechanisms, right, are also also come into play at a more significant degree, right? And so Oka and Onisha are some of the cheapest places in the country now as per pot of jollof rice.
Right, and looking at this report at this time, what are your recommendations, that should be the response to the challenges, highlighted in this food market? And, you talk about potential unrest, in this report. Walk us through that.
Yeah, so obviously addressing the security picture will go a long way towards helping. I know that there's a lot of conversation on the policy side around what to do with infrastructure. Funding remains obviously a key concern, right, in that respect. But probably doing a better job of prioritizing which infrastructural projects, right, to invest in will probably be the smart strategy to go, especially in enhancing those regional linkages, right? So you look at Lagos and Port Harcourt, for example. How do you enhance those transport links to ensure that the surrounding states and the surrounding regions, which feed, right, those big markets in those two main metropolitan areas, right, are better connected with the internet? That would do that would do some quick work, right, within the next sort of 6 to 12 months to begin to arrest some of those inflationary trends in those specific markets. Finally, the overall policy posture has to be one of food security as against food self-sufficiency. And I know there's a lot of conflation on the policy side, but also on the commentary side around what those two things mean, right? Food security prioritizes getting food into the plates of your taxpayers and your citizens at the lowest possible, right, price. And if that involves, right, some form of short-term importation, right, in order to create that cushion, right, for consumers, that's important. Food self-sufficiency on the other hand prioritizes you growing as much of what you want as possible. Now, when you consider the funding challenges, building that into infrastructure, upgrading the way we do agriculture, most of Nigerian agriculture is still at a subsistence level, even in 2023, right? Food security is probably the easier and the quicker strategy to deploy while we gradually build towards a wider food self-sufficiency strategy. I think, just having all of these moving parts, right, working in sync with each other is probably the best way to go in order to ensure that you, Ladi, and I continue to enjoy our pot of jollof rice at reasonable rates.
Exactly. I think I need to look into my food garden and get that going at some point. But I think I saw the Ghana Jollof Food Index. It looked like it had a downward trend to it, looking at that slide. And we've had that debate, which one is the best. So since it's more expensive here, does that make our jollof better? More pricey?
Well, I mean, you could look at it from the standpoint of Nigerian jollof being a premium product. I know what you're doing with that question, like,
right.
And I don't know whether to play that game with you. But I should say that Ghanaian headline inflation, right, has come down somewhat, right, and so that was sort of reflected in the index. More importantly, Nigerian jollof is more expensive than Ghanaian jollof, largely because of that foreign exchange currency risk, right? And so I don't think it's really about the fact that, even though I know there are lots of culinary innovators out there here in the country, but I don't think it's really because we've sort of moved the needle on jollof rice innovation yet. It's really just because the value of the naira has moved somewhat within the time we track these numbers.
Right. All right. So I guess we'll just say, well, maybe Nigerian jollof is the best because we're Nigerians. Thank you so much. Kemisit Effiong, partner, SBM Intelligence. Great having your perspective this morning.
My pleasure. Thanks.
All right, we'll take a break now. In Nigeria, it's World Investor Week. We'll hear more about how it's going to be marked right here in Nigeria. Do stay with us.